Please stand as you are able for the reading of the Gospel. From John chapter 8, verses 12 through 18. Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Then the Pharisees said to him, You are testifying on your own behalf. Your testimony is not valid. And Jesus answered, Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, because I know where I have come and where I am going. But you do not know where I have come from or where I am going. You judge by human standards. I judge no one. Yet even if I do judge, my judgment is valid, for it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law, it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is valid. I testify on my own behalf, and the Father who sent me testifies on my behalf. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Please be seated.
Friends, please join me in a spirit of prayer. Our gracious sovereign and our God, assist me to proclaim, to spread to all the world abroad the honors and glories of thy name. Amen. Friends, I was running late for my flight that morning. It had been storming all night, and now it was storming during the day, and the visibility was very limited. And I was relieved when I got to the airport there in Austin to find out that my plane had not yet left. I had made it in plenty of time. They had us go and board the plane, and after we got on, they let us know that the visibility was severely limited due to all the weather, and that we shouldn't be taking off for a little bit, that we would have to check about every 15 minutes until they would release us and let us go. And I can kind of remember thinking to myself, like, well, I'm glad my plane was still here, but having grown up in Texas, I hadn't seen it that cloudy before, or that bad, where the visibility was limited enough that you couldn't get a plane off the ground. And so I was thinking through that and going then, and then it kind of went to my mind, like, well, should we take off in this if it's that bad? I mean, is that safe? And so I was waiting. Well, about 45 minutes went by, and sure enough, the pilot came on and said, we're going to go ahead and try to take off. We've got just enough visibility for the airplane to get up in the air. I remember paying a little more attention this time. I was a bit nervous, and I kind of looked out the window, and the rain was coming down straight until we started getting that jet plane going, and then it's all coming at the side. You know how that goes. And I'm watching the water go off the wing and the side of the plane as we kind of get up into the air, and suddenly those clouds that had been thundering all night, we're up in them. And I'm going, oh, wow, we really can't see now. I mean, I've never prayed for radar before, but I was in that moment. But there was something that happened as we gained altitude. There was a moment when I was looking out the window, and suddenly we burst through beyond the clouds. And I mean, I knew this. I hadn't forgotten this from when I was a child, but I guess I had never really paid attention. I mean, do y'all know this? That above the clouds, the sun is always shining? And there the sun just hit the plane in such a way that my eyes got kind of took back for a moment. It made an impression on me. And I wonder, has anybody else been caught in the storms? Has anyone else lived in a world where it seems as though day after day is gray and bogged down? Have we been in places that seems like the rain and the storms are all there are in life, making us late for everything and trying to find our way? A pandemic? Political divisions? Challenges in our work? What will our school-age kids do next? How will we get life back to normal where all our relationships and marriages survive? These are questions that echo when we live in a world full of storms. But I wonder if when Jesus said, "I am the light of the world," he meant something more than like he's a flashlight. Or even a lighthouse that kind of gives a little light, or even a candle that lights a space, but maybe, just maybe, when he says, "I am the light of the world," there's a reminder that God's love has never stopped shining on our world. That there is a reality beyond the storm clouds and fear, where God's love is being made known, that indeed Jesus is the light of the world. This text here starts suddenly enough, it jumps right in. Here's Jesus saying, again he spoke to them, "I am the light of the world." It happens right after a story that I think when I tell it, most of y'all will be familiar with it. There were people trying to always trick Jesus and get Jesus to say the wrong thing. And so we're told that the scribes and the Pharisees have brought a woman before him who is accused of adultery. They have the stones ready to go so that they might kill her in front of them there at the temple. Do you remember the story? We're told in John that Jesus kind of reaches down in the dirt and starts drawing. Have you ever wondered what he was drawing? I mean, was it the letter of the 10 Commandments to remind them of what they're not supposed to do? Was it some sort of law from Leviticus or Exodus? The text doesn't tell us. But he looks up to those who had gathered this woman and seemed ready to put her to death. And he says, "Let you who is without sin cast the first stone." We're told in the text that starting with the elders first, they each drop their rock and walk away, till only this woman and Jesus are left there, him drawing in the dirt, her standing in front of him. I can't imagine the fear she must have felt in that patriarchal society, first accused, judged, and about to be killed. I can't imagine what was running through her mind when Jesus looks up again from the dirt and says, none of them are here to judge. Go and sin no more." And Jesus sets her free. You see, it's right after that, immediately following that story, like the very next line, Jesus says to them again, "I am the light of the world." And then it continues, and you probably heard this idea of testifying, and like there's a court case, and who can make the call and say these things, and how do we know it's true? And that continues. But then there's this other story right behind it. We're told that there's a man who's been blind since his birth. And if you've been around, you've probably heard this story too in the church, right? This man who has been blind from birth. The disciples ask him, who sinned? Who caused this? And Jesus replies, this isn't because of sin. And again, Jesus goes into the dirt, the mud, and then he spits in it. And he takes that mud and he wipes it on the man's eyes. And he tells him to go to the pool at Shalom, which means the pool where they are sent, and to take that and to wash it off. And this man who was blind from birth has his sight restored. And not only can he see again, but nobody can believe it when he tries to testify and tell them what's happened. When the scribes and the Pharisees come to him, they don't believe what he said until his parents come and testify that he's been blind from birth. And when they ask Jesus about that, what does Jesus say again? I am the light of the world. We have a woman who's saved from a system that tried to tear her down, and people freed from participating in sin that was ripping lives apart. How many times have I heard that message with people trying to think, what caused the sin? How many times over here I hear of a man who gets his sight restored, gets his life back, can now see? How many times have I heard the obsessive focus on the sin instead of the light of the world? You see, it's interesting. There's a little bit more here going on. Both of these stories take place during what we would call the Festival of Tabernacles, or Sukkoth. Say it, it's really fun. Sukkoth. Sukkoth. Y'all are all Sukkoth experts, right? Y'all been studying your Sukkoth? The choir laughed at y'all. Choir, are y'all ready for a Sukkoth quiz? All right. What does Sukkoth remind us of? Our complete and total dependence on following God. And so there at the temple in Jerusalem, what they would do is they would build mighty towers and pillars, and up on the top they would put a candle to remind people of the story of the Exodus, that as they left Egypt, that God's self led them as a pillar of fire that they might follow. They also there would go and stay in a kind of outdoor shanty that they would build. Some nowadays will put it in their patio or out in their yard, to remind them that everything they do and everything they have is totally dependent on following God. And you see, it's in that place of that festival that Jesus tells the scribes and the Pharisees, I am the light of the world. I am the one to follow. I am that light that protects and leads you to safety. I am God in the flesh. What do we think he was drawing in the sand? I know what I would draw in my fear and guilt well, my holiness is right and their holiness and way of doing things is wrong. The way that would make Brad seem like the best, right? That's what I would be drawing. But I wonder if I could ask John what John thought Jesus was drawing in the sand when he was writing those letters. I wonder if there might have been a bait, right? The beginning of the Bible. Because when John tells the story of Jesus' birth, he says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And he goes on in those first 14 chapters to talk about light no fewer than 5 times and to describe how the light had come into the world and the darkness could not overcome it. And it ends in this kind of climatic statement where what he explains and shouts loudly is that light brought truth and grace. When they bring her before him, I think he's offended and upset. How could it be that a God who so loved the world, that he created it for our blessing and benefit, could imagine a people who had become so lost that the way they practiced their righteousness meant that they must kill and condemn others? How could they be so confused and lost that they would blame the victim for being blind? Who would ever not understand that God's primary way of acting to the world is grace that reveals the truth? It would be like forgetting that the sun is shining even in our cloudy sky. You see, the love of God has never stopped trying to reach each one of us, no matter what we feel like we face or think we've done. This was made real to me kind of in my pastoral role when I was a student pastor at Benita United Methodist Church. I met Dwayne and Gail that very first Sunday I ever preached a message. It wasn't as good as this one, just for the record, okay? And there I was meeting them. They looked a little different than the other church people. I don't know if you've ever met someone who had kind of matted skin that looks like it has the dirt kind of caked in because they had been making methamphetamines in their place, okay? Dwayne seemed to have some sort of speech impediment. And so, I had a lot of, kind of grace for him. Gail was just kind of always off. You always felt like something was going to be happening. And that very first Sunday I was there at the church, they were taking a love offering for this family, which I thought was just so beautiful and wonderful. It made me happy to be there. And it was kind of cool. About 3 weeks on, I'm still figuring out we could visit back then. It was a little safer, not all the masks, we're going place to place. And I was getting to know some people. And that next Sunday morning, here comes the chair of the SPR, the chair of the trustees, and the council chair to meet me before church on Sunday. And they came up to me and they told me that Gail and Dwayne had gone over to one of the older members' houses to try to get more money and started getting verbally abusive and threatened physical abuse against them. Did I mention I had been a pastor 3 weeks, right? Was brand new, right? And what did you think they wanted me to do? Would I go talk to this, to Dwayne and Gail and get this thing sorted? So sure enough, it was my duty to wait there for them to get there that day, out under the covered patio. And when they came up, I had a conversation with them. And so there I began talking and just explaining, look, we're going to have to set a boundary. You can't go over to people's homes and hit them up for money. We're going to try to find a way to help you, but we can't have that happening. At that point in my life, I had worked offshore on oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico. I had heard some really creative cussing in my lifetime. Gail could have had a PhD in it. I have never been so assaulted by words ever. It was quite something. They left mad, upset. I preached and did my duties that morning. I went home and was really ready to quit ministry at that point. I was pretty sure that I was the absolute worst pastor on the planet. And I prayed for them and cried for them a lot over the next few weeks. About a month and a half went by, and my phone rang. Pastor Brad, this is Gail. Dwayne's in jail. I need you to go get $50 from him that he owes me. I mean, she had just told me how good for nothing I was, and now I guess I was good for something, right? And so I'm going to go try to help out this situation or do whatever I'm going to do and trying to figure that out. And I said, well, Gail, I know Thomas Kurse, and he's the sheriff at the time there in Nacogdoches County. I said, I know I'll be able to get in there and see him. Would you want to go with me? Oh, no, Pastor Brad, I wouldn't be able to come out. She couldn't go fill everything out to go in the jail. So I said, okay, all right. So now I'm aiding and abetting, like, what all will you do for Jesus, right? I was like trying to figure this out. So I go up there and I go see Dwayne. They put me in a little side room that the attorneys use to consult with their clients. And there they brought out the wrong inmate. So I thought, because here was a young man who was clean, articulate, spoke in complete sentences. As I began visiting him, he told me more about his story. But imagine these words he said to me. He said, I'm more free in here than when I'm out because the addiction has control over me. I mean, can you imagine living in a world and a life where the incarceration was better for you than freedom? Any heart of judgment or pretense or thinking I was better than anyone else in the world melted away in that moment because it was different than what I had thought. I began visiting him regularly, as I said, when I got a call, and this time it wasn't from Gail. It was from her mom and sister who wanted me to know that the hepatitis that had been attacking her body meant she was coming to the end of her life, and she wanted to see me before she passed. So I went up there to Nacogdoches Memorial Hospital and to the area where she was, and when I started to go in the room, she started waving me off and told him that she didn't want to see me. And I was like, well, she told y'all to call me because is that what really happened? It was the first thing I was checking to make sure because, she had cussed me pretty good that day, right? And they said, oh, yes, they all started laughing. She wanted to clean up before she saw me. And I don't know if you've ever had a moment where God did something so beautiful that you felt like you just watched it happen in front of you. But friends, there was no goodness of Pastor Brad. It literally was, I just had a front row seat while God did something amazing. But as I walked around that curtain and saw her, she just started crying and said, I'm so sorry for everything. And I said, God has never stopped loving you. And I hugged her and we cried. And I don't know how to describe the light of Christ with any sort of poetry or accuracy. But it was in those tears. It was in that room. It was in that moment when I could tell she knew that God had never stopped loving her. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Again, he says to them, I am the light of the world. He is the one full of truth and grace, restoring even the broken back to the beginning of creation. The light has shined in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. My friends, the joy of being part of this church and being with so many people in this place is that you keep that light lit in the lives of those who need to be reminded that somewhere up above those storm clouds, on the mornings when they feel all is lost, that God's love has never stopped trying to reach them in truth and grace. Amen.